They say history repeats itself. But last week, UConn almost broke that streak. Luckily for Syracuse football, they clawed back from down 11 in the fourth quarter to move to 1-1 on the year. Now, their focus switches to a piece of history SU has dominated: Colgate. The Orange haven't lost to the Raiders since 1950. The Cuse are also 22-0 against FCS schools all time. So will history repeat itself, or will the Raiders rock the dome? We'll break it all down, because Cuse Countdown starts right now.
Welcome inside our CitrusTV studios for another edition of Cuse Countdown. Joined alongside John Boccio and Griffin Marcy, I'm Nathaniel Cunningham. Football season is officially in full swing, and that means an old rivalry gets renewed tonight in the Dome as Syracuse takes on Colgate for the 69th all-time matchup. Guys, I mean, I know it's not one that Colgate's dominated as of late, but still, nice tune-up for the Orange.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, this is an FCS opponent versus an FBS opponent, and we all know what the outcomes of those games typically are, but still, Syracuse, a lot to work on this week.
It absolutely should be. Last week wasn't pretty by any means, so this week is your final tune-up game of the season before you get into the ACC slate, where it's going to be possibly really ugly, so you really need to take advantage of a game like this week against a lower talented opponent.
Well, Griffin, you mentioned it was ugly. It just wasn't the way that Syracuse wanted that game to go. The offense was dormant through three quarters, but then they came alive when their back was against the wall. Griffin, I know they say a win is a win, but like you mentioned, it just wasn't pretty.
That's an entirely made-up statement. That was not a win in the books by any means. You beat UConn in overtime, was just completely really ugly. Your quarterback play was minuscule, to say it nicely. The defense really struggled. I don't know how you can come out with that in a positive sense by any means.
I completely agree, Griffin. I mean, this offense looked horrible up until the fourth quarter, and even in the fourth quarter, there were stints where they still looked bad. So a win is, sure, a win on the schedule, but should not be a win in the hearts of anybody within that system right now. I mean, this offense just passed far too much. They threw the ball over 50 times on the game, and realistically, Steve Angeli looked objectively bad for the first three quarters.
You could say that.
I mean, I don't think you can. I think you have to say that after a game like that. Plus, they didn't even go to a guy like Yasin Willis throughout the game, who had 23 carries his last time out. It ended up being that Will Nixon got the guy with the most touches. So while I respect the switch-up of the offense, there comes a certain point where it's like, what are we doing here?
Well, John, you said Steve Angeli, he looked objectively bad. You saw the stats on the screen. Over 400 yards.
The worst 400 passing yards I've ever seen.
A couple of touchdowns.
I've ever seen.
Stat padding at its finest.
This is the guy that Fran Brown has trusted with this program, but he was named QB1 just less than a month ago, so it wasn't entirely confidence coming into this year. And against the Huskies, you heard fans saying, we want Ricky, but after the UConn game, head coach Fran Brown said he's sticking with his guy.
Nah, man, it's Steve. I'm Latino. Ain't nothing else happened to do that. I don't like to do that. I always think about Ricky, like we met the other day, and I talk about Ricky. Ricky's one play away to go in. When it's Ricky's time, then I'm going to be 100% behind Ricky. Right now, this is Steve's moment. It's Steve's team.
Well, I mean, if you're hearing that as Steve Angeli, that's got to make you feel good, Griffin, but there still are some glaring issues when you go 33 for 53 on pass attempts.
Nate, I have a question for you. You know any good divorce lawyers?
I do not.
Well, Fran Brown needs one, because we need a divorce from Steve Angeli. It's been a really poor performance so far this season. It's not been very good. You know, last week we talked about 400 yards, sure. That was completely off checkdowns and consistently struggling overall throughout the whole game. It is time for Ricky Collins.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and I know I just talked about how Steve Angeli did not look good against UConn, but I like the way that Fran Brown is handling the situation. I think it's way too early to pull the plug on a guy that you brought in because you knew he's probably going to be your starter come August. So I like that Fran Brown has been keeping him in. Plus, a little stat that not many know about, PFF gave Angeli 8 big-time throws quote big-time throws as per PFF. That was the most in college football last week. So clearly
threw the
there's
ball
some things
almost
that are
50
going right.
times.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. But there's also other guys throwing the ball 50 times. It's not like he's the only one on this
They're
planet
not
that
throwing
knows how to
against
sling it.
Colgate 50 times or
Yeah.
UConn 50 times.
Sure, UConn's still been a solid program that's been on the rise. I don't think it's the time yet, quite yet, to bring in Ricky Collins. I like that Fran Brown's been opting towards Angeli early on in this season.
You guys mentioned this aerial attack that Syracuse took against UConn. Against Tennessee, they focused on the run a lot more. And that's an area where LSU transfer Ricky Collins really succeeds. So I'm going to bring that question around, especially now that we know that Yasin Willis will not be playing against the Raiders. It's kind of is this play style going to be more pass heavy without your top running back, John? Or are they going to kind of rely on maybe some other options?
Well, here's the thing. We know what the answer will be, and I hope it's not going to be that answer. And then there's also one that it should be. The answer that it likely will be is the fact that Steve Angeli is going to throw the ball 60 times this game. But what it really should come down to is Will Nixon has to get fed the rock. He did not look bad against UConn. Again, he got the most touches of any weapon on the team. So clearly they were kind of waiting on him to come into this Colgate game as maybe a bigger hitter than what he has been in the past. So I think ultimately it will come down to Steve Angeli throwing the ball as many times as he would like, but I would enjoy seeing Syracuse opt more towards the run game.
I completely agree. Last week you saw them kind of, like we talked about earlier, wishy-washy, sometimes committing to the run, sometimes not. I just don't understand why last week you saw Will Nixon taking so many of those snaps over Yasin Willis. This week they won't have another choice, so I think you'll see Nixon involved a ton, but there's really no reason for there to be this constant juggling and balance of the offense.
The juggling of the offense, whether they decide to go to those running backs or not, is something that will be seen later this evening. But if they choose to go the aerial attack route, you saw against UConn, they have the options to do that. Dan Villari had over 100 yards. Justice Ross Simmons had 2 scores, and Darrell Gill Jr. looked like a solid option as well. Griffin, if they are going to try to throw the ball, like John said, 60 times, at least they know they've got people that can catch it.
Absolutely, and I think the key guy in that sort of aspect there is going to be Dan Villari, a guy that's going to find the soft spot in the zone for you, especially when you're going to be dropping back all the time. He's got some good matchups he can take against the linebackers, and that should be a really good step. And also, you got guys on the outside. You do have some talent. You saw last weekend, Justice Ross Simmons kind of exploded a little bit on the outside. Jonte Cook in the slot's a really big weapon. We'll see. I think that they can just spread the ball out a little bit more.
I like the play of Dan Villari. I think he did look very good against UConn last week. I'm actually not going to go with anybody that's being shown on your screen right now. I think Jonte Cook is going to rise as the primary option for Steve Angeli. We saw him look that way a lot his last game out against Tennessee, in week 1. And Jonte Cook had a lot of very good reps against a then top 25 defense, now a top 20 defense in the country. So I think Jonte Cook down the stretch will end up being the option. You bring him in from Texas/Washington for a reason. So that's why I think Angeli's going to be looking his way quite a lot.
The offense has got really just today to figure it out, because after Colgate, the schedule gets a lot harder. 3 ranked squads, trips to SMU and Georgia Tech, rivalries, Boston College and Pitt in the Dome, and I can't forget about a Halloween matchup with Bill Belichick and UNC. John, this schedule is not easy going forward. How does Syracuse make it out with at least a couple of wins?
It's a grueling schedule, for sure. And I genuinely think a couple more wins is a stretch, to say the least. I see one more win on this schedule after Colgate. Maybe 2, maybe. You see it on your screen here. I would say that last week of the regular season, Boston College on November 29th, that is the most winnable game. I think Syracuse could take it out, especially in the Dome in the last week of the season. But ultimately, this is going to come down to you have to win the games that you theoretically should win. And I would say Boston College is the only game on that schedule right now that I would say SU should win.
I think you're really sleeping on the Eagles. Dylan Lonergan, the Alabama transfer, has been lighting it up so far for Boston College. Just put 40 points in East Lansing this weekend on the board. They did lose that game. But I think you're 1 win left on the schedule, because I also agree. Multiple wins is just not going to be an option at this point in time. I think your 1 win on the schedule is going to be at home on Halloween night against North Carolina. I think that's your best chance. All these other games, multiple games against ranked top 10 opponents, going to Clemson next week, it's going to be really ugly. I think UNC is the only game that you're going to be winning this season.
I think it's interesting to note as well that you got to go to a college football playoff team in SMU. The Orange have never beaten Duke in the Dome. And then you also mentioned that Boston College game. Syracuse was outcoached in that game last year, and that's why the Eagles took home a win. So, I mean, these guys, they think there's a lot of work that needs to be done for Syracuse. But on the flip side, we're going to see how concerned these two really are. We'll let you know how much you need to panic in just a couple of minutes. Cuse Countdown rolls on. Welcome back inside our CitrusTV studios as we keep rolling on here on Cuse Countdown. Joined alongside Griffin, Marcy, and John Boccio, I'm Nathaniel Cunningham. It's been a shaky 2 weeks for Syracuse football. A tough loss to a ranked Tennessee team, and then you beat UConn, but you need an overtime period. You guys have already expressed your concern for this squad, so what better way to kind of gauge how you're feeling than a little game of panic meter? It's pretty simple. I'm going to give you guys a topic. All I want you to tell me is, are you lowly concerned? You in the middle area, or are you really concerned about this issue? Something we didn't talk about just a little bit ago, the defense against Tennessee. SU gave up over 250 yards on the ground against UConn. SU gave up over 250 yards in the air. John, are you concerned about this defense at all?
So, funnily enough, I understand that the run defenses looked a little bit shaky through 2 games here, but my concern pretty low right now for this defense. I think there were a lot of stretches against both Tennessee and UConn that they looked pretty solid. And look, the first half against Tennessee, shaky. We all know it. They gave up 31 points. But in that second half, and since then, they've given up a total of 4 touchdowns. That's not something to shy away from. I think ultimately this SU defense hasn't looked phenomenal. It's been up to the middle of the pack standards.
I think you're crazy. You know, you talked middle of the pack. That is such a far reach for this team's defense right now. My concern level is at moderate, and the only reason it's not higher is just because they played a lower quality opponent last week. In week 1 against Tennessee, you got torched. That was Swiss cheese left and right. They put a 40 bomb on you, and for the first half you had
But the second half looked way better.
Sure, the first half still happens, and they got shredded up and down the field. Aguilar could have walked up the field, and nobody was stopping him. And last week, you had really key chances to step up. At the end of the game, your offense finally steps up and gets off the field, gives you a lead. What do? 40 seconds left. You walk down and let them give a field goal. This defense is really very lucky it's not an extreme concern at this point.
I totally disagree with that. I think the fact that they were even able to hang with Tennessee in that second half, Syracuse nearly
They lost the game by 20 points.
Syracuse nearly had the advantage in terms of second half points. I think that's a lot of it is due to the defense because the offense looked bad the entire way through pretty much.
No question about it.
No question about it, right? Who was semi keeping them in it? I think their defense was a strong suit is kind of a harsh word, but better than expected.
Sure. You guys clearly disagree, and I've asked just one question. So let's get a little bit more specific, though. Let's talk about the trenches, both on the offensive and the defensive side. They haven't looked great, and Syracuse's O-line allowed 5 sacks against Tennessee. Griffin, does this offensive and defensive line concern you?
Now, this is the biggest concern for me, Nate. Left 5 sacks in week 1. 3 sacks in week 2. Are they trying to get Steve Angeli killed out there? And you know what? The defensive line hasn't looked much better either. Week 1, Tennessee ran all over them. There's really no positive signs you've seen from the trenches, and it's just only going to get harder. This week, you'll have a relative week off. Against Clemson, you're going to go against one of the best D-lines in the country. Steve Angeli is going to better fear for his life walking into Memorial Stadium. I don't know how this defense or offensive line could be anything other than a high concern.
Griffin, I hate doing this, I really do, but I agree with you on this one. Well, okay, sure. Right. Yeah, if the panic meter is all the way down here, I'm right in that red.
You're standing right next to Steve over there, just like the defenders.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you look at the numbers behind this offensive line specifically, they've given up the 4th most sacks in the nation, and they've given up 83 yards on those sacks, by far the worst mark in the country. Just a really difficult look. And then when it comes to the defensive side, this team's like a team that wants to get home 24/7, but they've done it once.
They're lost.
2 games.
They're on the wrong street.
It's bad. It's objectively bad, and that's why I think my panic meter is all the way up, sky high. You might as well put me on the moon.
Well, as someone that lived in the trenches themselves,
I thought you were going to say you lived on the moon. I was pretty excited.
That would have been a little.
Someone who lived in the trenches, you would have loved to have seen a little bit more of some security with this offensive and defensive line. But then that brings the question of who's to blame? When you look at this coaching staff, last year they had one of the best offenses in the country, so they didn't really need to make those excellent plays. It's a completely new roster with a lot of holes. John, is this coaching staff doing enough to maybe not concern you a ton, or are there some red flags that are being raised?
I think there's more red flags than you can count right now, Nate, and this is where me and Griffin might defer a little bit more. I think there was just an unrealistic expectation set with this coaching staff. After a 10-win season last year around, everybody thought Fran Brown was the messiah of Syracuse football, when clearly that's just not the case. He comes into this year with a far worse roster, and well, the team looks far worse. There's no denying it. And plus, the biggest thing that I saw with how this team is working right now, red zone offense. They look bad. They have only converted in the red zone 72.7% of the time. Yeah, that might sound okay. Realistically, they're 24th worst in the nation when it comes to red zone defense. And one of those failures was against UConn when they were starting the drive on the 18-yard line. That just simply can't happen. That's why coaching concerns me quite a lot. I'm saying all the way up, I'm high concern.
Okay, don't get me wrong. I agree with you a little bit, but I think you're overreacting. The biggest cause of concern for me, though, on the coaching staff is the offense half the time just looks disorganized. We're running the play clock down to 10 seconds for no reason half the time. It just doesn't seem like they fully know what's going on half the time. But this is a coaching staff that won 10 games in year 1. And it was a little bit easier of a schedule, but I think you're a little bit too harsh on the coaching staff.
They won 10 games in year 1, but we both just said that they're not going to win nearly as many, so it should raise a little bit more concern.
It is, but I just think you're dealing with a much different hand in the deck this year.
All right, there's a lot of disagreements from you two, but we talked enough about Syracuse. There is another team that's playing tonight, and that's the Colgate Raiders. When we come back, we'll tell you everything you need to know about the FCS squad.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown here in our CitrusTV studios, alongside John Boccio and Griffin Marcy. I'm Nathaniel Cunningham. Our focus has to switch now to the Colgate side of things, where the Raiders have had a rough start to the year. Losses to number 22 Monmouth and number 12 Villanova, they might seem like impressive, but this is the FCS that we're talking about, and both those losses were by just a score. John, it seems like this team is getting close. They just can't get over the hump.
Colgate's trending in the right direction, but again, we're saying it like it's not a big deal when realistically, these are FCS squads. I understand that they're both ranked and the expectations should be low in these games, but when you lose against FCS opponents, you typically can't compete against FBS ones. And I mean, again, they didn't look half bad. They had a 14-0 lead over Monmouth after a quarter, only lost that game by 3, only lost to Villanova by a touchdown. It was either tied or a one-score game for basically 3 of those quarters. So that's why I think Colgate isn't quite as bad as some people may make them out to be, but ultimately struggling against FCS opponents isn't a great sign.
Absolutely, but that Monmouth game itself, they're up 31-7 in that game until their quarterback went down. So I think, that game's a little bit of a wash, a little bit, because they probably would have won that game. Does their quarterback not go down? But don't get me wrong, it has not been very pretty to start things off for this season. You never want to start 0-2, and especially if you're going into Syracuse this week, just not where you want to be at.
This team trying to turn things around, they've got a guy that can help do that. Their new head coach, Kurt Fitzpatrick, comes in after being at Cortland for the last 4 years, and all he knew how to do with the Red Dragons was win. 45-5 record, never lost a conference game, and won a Division III national title in 2023. Griffin, you mentioned that they're just trying to get back in there. If they got a chance, it's with a guy that's got a pretty good track record.
Absolutely. Completely made the right hire so far this season, or not so far this season, but that's the right guy for the job. Fran Brown came out this week and talked about how he thinks that he almost wanted Coach Fitzpatrick on the job, on his staff on the sideline, which would have been a really big help. But Coach Fitzpatrick is a proven winner in his career so far. They have the right guy over there.
I think it's also just a good cultural hire at the end of the day. He grew up in Syracuse, loved Syracuse football and his time in his childhood, goes over to Cortland, is phenomenal, just an hour south of here, and now he heads up to Colgate, just a central New York guy through and through, and that's something that I think a lot of people are going to back, and that's why I think Kurt Fitzpatrick leads a very good locker room and a very good offense.
Well, he developed Zach Boyes to have program records at Cortland, and now he's got a senior QB in Zach Osborne who's doing just that. He can sling it with his arm, but also move it with his legs. John, this is a QB that can really punish an Orange defense.
Yeah, Osborne looked awesome through the first 2 games, and that's pretty much undeniable against Monmouth before going down in that third quarter. Had over 200 passing yards in the air, plus 2 passing touchdowns. So ultimately, he's looked very solid through a couple games. I mean, even against Villanova, 15 for 30, nearly 250 yards through the air, and another pair of touchdowns to notch that tally. So I think Zach Osborne has been very solid through 2 games. Interested to see how he fares against a Power 5 defense.
Absolutely, I totally agree, because you've seen last week was how Syracuse kind of just played back and let the quarterbacks just dink and dump that bend don't break defense. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how they approach the defense this week. But I do think a really good quarterback. He's performed really well to start this year, and he's got some great weapons that's to throw to make his job a little bit easier.
A quarterback, though, is only 350 yards through 2 games. However, the challenge ahead is facing 17-year-old Demetrius Samuel Jr., who certainly has a chip on his shoulder after 2 weeks. So, Griffin and John, who's going to win this week's marquee matchup?
Thanks, Nate. Now it's time to get into our marquee matchup of the week, and this one's going to be a battle of the experience versus not so much a senior and a freshman battle between Trayvon Saunders and Demetrius Samuel. So, John, let's take a look at the tape.
Let's see.
It's going to be a battle on the outside, and one that Trayvon Saunders is going to have the advantage in. Look at this speed as he burns the corner, 5 yards of separation immediately. That's going to be on full display Friday night, and Syracuse going to have a hard time keeping up. But he doesn't just make plays on the outside. He makes plays in the slot as well. Look at this speed in space, going to be a complete recipe for disaster for Syracuse all game long. They don't have anyone that's going to keep up with them, but even if they do somehow get within 5 yards of him, look at this play. He can make plays with his hands, nice soft hands as he's diving into the end zone. He can do whatever you ask for him. He's got speed, he's got nice hands. Watch this power. Throw the guy off him, he's going to walk into the end zone, and it's going to be all night like that on Friday night.
Well, Griffin, you can show me as much tape as you want. The only play I need is one for Demetrius Samuel to show him why he's going to eat up Trayvon Saunders all game long. We're going to pause right here on this one. You've got Joey Aguilar looking at that right side. Who's this tight end over here that's coming across the formation? Well, that's Demetrius Samuel's man in his zone. So what's he going to do? He's going to stay back, stay calm, and let's see the result. Aguilar faces pressure, has to roll out to the right side. Where's he throwing? To that tight end? No fly zone. Demetrius Samuel gobbles that pass right up. I mean, that's free all game long. And we'll see it in slow-mo once again. Demetrius Samuel stays back, stays low, has to come out of his zone, make sure he knows where this tight end is, and bang, slaps it right down. If a 17-year-old can do that against a top 25 offense, then, well, who's saying he can't do that against Colgate? That's why I think Samuel's going to have the best of Saunders in this game on Friday.
You talk about him being a 17-year-old. That frontal lobe isn't even fully developed at this point. He's not going to be stopping an elite receiving threat like Trayvon Saunders.
Clearly, he's got the IQ and doesn't even need the frontal lobe.
That was one play.
Oh, it's one play against Tennessee. Now he's playing Colgate.
He was standing stationary on the outside. He ain't doing nothing like that.
Standing stationary. You just want to down the IQ because you think Saunders has the best of them. We'll find out on this Friday what actually happens. But for now, we're going to come back on CC. When we do get back here, we'll get you our keys and predictions for this game between SU and the Red Raiders.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Welcome to my house. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The walls were closing in. Clearly a case of too much family, too close, 24/7. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. You'll find lots of ideas to help you handle the family stresses of being confined to close quarters. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It could help you find a little more breathing room.
We're almost done wrapping up shop here in our CitrusTV studios alongside John Boccio and Griffin Marcy. I'm Nathaniel Cunningham. It's only a couple things left to do on the docket, gentlemen, and the first thing we got to do is your keys to the game. Syracuse trying to get back in the win column, really prove that overtime win against UConn was a fluke. John, what do they need to do to get the win done?
My key to the game, pretty simple, to be totally honest with you guys. It's just run the ball. Steve Angeli was throwing like he had all the freedom in the world. And against Tennessee, when he wasn't forced to pass the ball every play, he looked a lot more calm on his checkdowns, looked way more in control of the game. Wasn't the same case against UConn when they were just letting him air it out every single time. So that's why I'm going to say hand the ball off to Will Nixon and see what he can do against this defense.
I'm kind of on the same track as you, but my kind of thought is we really need to focus on keeping your offensive identity in check. In week one, just pounding the ball constantly. Week two, it's airing out left and right. This week, you need to figure out a mix of both and not just be, one drive throwing it 3 times, one drive running it 3 times. Figure it out what's your bread and butter.
Well, before we get into what you guys think is going to happen tonight, we got to take a look at what happened last week and what our other Cuse Countdown squad thought of the game against UConn. I mean, you see AJ, Ben, and Milo, they all picked it right. He got some ball knowers on the Cuse Countdown last week.
Yeah, they did a really solid job. I mean, Milo definitely the best pick out of the 3. Lends himself pretty high up on that list. I liked that pick out of Milo. I think AJ's pick wasn't bad, but just didn't pan out too well for him.
I like my man Ben Chadwick's pick a little bit better. That's where I would have gone with last week, but hey, I wouldn't have been right.
I mean, listen, now before I get into my pick, I want to let you guys know I was top the leaderboard last year, so you got an elite ball knower. But anyways, real quick, Griffin, what do you think the score is going to be between Syracuse and Colgate?
This one won't really be that close. It's going to turn out to be 42-7 Syracuse, and they're going to run it up the scoreboard on just too much talent on this game all around. Colgate's just not going to be able to compete.
Yeah, I agree. I think this game is going to get pretty out of hand pretty quick. I'm going to say a little bit lower, scoring 35-6 Syracuse is going to be my prediction on this one. Tough for the standings because if this one goes wrong, then we could be deep into the differential. But either way, I think the Orange get this done in pretty dominant fashion.
You're thinking a little bit about the math game. So am I. I like the offensive perspective, and I think that this offense is going to be successful. I just don't know about the defense yet. I think that there's still some question marks that need to happen. I think they let up not one, but 2 scores. Give me Syracuse 42, Colgate 14. But that's all that we've got here on our Cuse Countdown episode today. It's been a great one. You go through everything with Syracuse, everything with Colgate, some improvements that the Orange need to do, but something that the Raiders need to potentially shock the dome, pick up their first win since 1950. From John Boccio, Griffin, Marcy, I've been Nathaniel Cunningham, our entire production crew. Enjoy the game.